Well, this is a very special episode for me. Back in about 2008, 2009, I've talked about this a million times. I was kind of depressed and suicidal at that point. My marriage had fallen apart. My health was in the toilet. Things were just not good. And I had decided to run the Marine Corps Marathon. I decided that was something I was going to do to turn my life around. And while I was running, I was listening to these audios by this guy named Brian Johnson. And Brian Johnson started this thing called Philosopher's Notes, where he would take some of the best books ever written, whether they're spiritual or self help or positive psychology, and he would summarize them into bite sized, usable chunks. And they were my lifeline when I was training for the marathon. And he highlighted several books from today's guest. Steve Chandler wrote a bunch of books way back when that were kind of in your face. They were kind of self help. They were kind of business coach leadership books. They were life changing. He brought concepts to me that I had never ever thought of at a time when I was at such rock bottom. I didn't know what to do with myself. And I listened voraciously. So every time I got one of those summaries, I would go buy the book that I liked and I would read the entire book. And that's how I brought myself out of basically deep depression and a bad time. Uh, Fast forward when I entered back into the business world and I decided to become a coach and address a lot of the things that had sent me over the deep end. Anyway, Steve Chandler, who is my next guest, and Rich Litvin, who wrote The Prosperous Coach together, helped me launch this career. So officially, Steve Chandler is a coach and corporate leadership trainer whose clients have included Scripps Health, Motorola, Merrill Lynch, Wells Fargo, Texas Instruments, over 25 Fortune 500 companies. He's written or co-written over 30 books: Reinventing Yourself, The Leader and the Coach, The Hands-Off Manager, uh, my favorite, Time Warrior and Wealth Warrior. Those books were really transformational for me. And the one I recommend and give out to everybody now, because his publisher Maurice Bassett put together the very best of Steve Chandler, so now you can get so much of it in one book. He's the founder and main teacher of the world-renowned Coaching Prosperity School, and he is Steve Chandler, and he's here today. Steve, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mark. I'm
I don't
glad.
know. I don't know what I would have done without your writing way back when. You write this stuff, you send it out in the world, and you don't know who it's going to touch. But
No,
you must get story after story about people whose like words you've written were the right words at the right time.
yeah, I do, and it's always great though. I always love hearing that. And I remember writing the first books down in my garage office, and I kept wondering, is anybody at all going to read this? All this effort I'm putting in, and I kept talking to myself, and I thought, well, even if one person gets help from this, it's reason enough to write it. So then I would continue writing. So I'm glad to hear that they were useful to you.
100%. And then you and I have talked about offline Death Wish, your book about your challenge with addiction, and some of your insights. And I think that is a companion to the big book for AA. And I give that away when I meet people who are struggling with addiction, because it makes it so accessible. There's something about your matter of factness and your earthiness and the way you bring, like, a lot of your work is ancient wisdom. A lot of it is from ancient teachings. Some of it's from like Werner Erhard and Est and all that stuff back in the 70s, and that positive psychology, but you package it in a way that people can hear it in plain English, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I always ask myself, what's the book I would want to read, and would I be able to understand it if I read it? Because so many books I have a hard time understanding. So I try for that. I try to write in a plain, simple way, like I was writing an email to a friend, and apparently it works.
It 100%. It's funny, when I read back the Rising Leader Handbook, for me, the way I wrote, I was a little embarrassed by the way I wrote, because it was very plain English and very in your face, and it reminds me of some of your early books. It's like I don't really have time to beat around the bush. This is kind of the way it is. I
Yeah.
wrote the entire book that way. So you were my inspiration there.
Well, and I want to mention your book is great, absolutely great. I've given it to so many people and they've thanked me and they said, finally, a book on leadership that just covers it all in such a straightforward way. So you really succeeded with that book.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Wasn't soliciting that plug, but I'll take it and we'll probably record it and put it on social media. So one of the things that was really transformational for me that just never occurred to me that you introduced was that who we are, our personalities, is fungible. Like one of the things I said in The Rising Leader is that, as a leader, you need to show up as who you need to be for the situation, for who you're leading, and that you are a dynamic human being. You're not a fixed personality. Can you kind of explain what you mean by you're not a fixed personality, just like, fait accompli?
Yeah, we're really not. We keep changing. We change with different people we're talking to. We try to pretend that I'm a certain way and I'm always this way, but it's not really true. And studies in neuroscience in the last 10 or 15 years have proven that the brain can change so much faster and so much more completely than we ever imagined. So the idea that we're stuck with what we're like, and a lot of times leaders say that, I'm just not built that way, or I'm hardwired this way, and so I can't be that way. And I was that way too. I had all these identity, character flaws, personality defects that I thought I'd have to live with my whole life. I didn't know it was so changeable. And then when I got into being coached and taking the different seminars I did, I really found out I can really be whomever I want to be, whoever I want to be. And that was exciting. And so can anyone else. And that's when I wrote Reinventing Yourself.
Mm.
And the point of reinventing yourself was we are invented to begin with. We make up a personality. We're in high school and we kind of make up a personality based on people we admire, based on our parents, if we admire them. And we put a little composite together and see what works, see what I can live with. But it's not permanent. It's not really a fixed identity.
Again, and that was such a revolutionary thought to me, because I thought I was this way, this is who I am, and this is what I have to work with. And I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
know that there was just so much more available to me to be a completely different person than who I was.
yeah, absolutely.
When I read Time Warrior, I was a hopeless people pleaser. I twisted myself into pretzels, especially since I was homeless and a drunk beforehand. I was trying to make up for that, and I was just a hopeless people pleaser and trying to buy love with acts of service and being a good boy. And that, I didn't think that there was something other than that. And reading Time Warrior and you introducing boundaries to me was like a complete and utter like different language. And
Yeah,
now, a decade and a half later, nobody would ever say that I'm a people pleaser. They would say, where you stand with Mark. He always sets his boundaries. He always asks for what, except in my romantic relationship, which seems to be the last place you can ever do these things. So I tell people you can be whoever you need to be. It just takes the time and the practice. Now let's turn to the whole purpose of this podcast and leadership. You've been coaching since before we knew what coaching was. Like you're a pioneer in this. There was self-help, there was seminars and things like that, but there wasn't coaching. Uh,
no,
yeah, and you went into these organizations and you first, I remember when I was in technology, and we'd have to sell the concept of the thing we invented before
yeah,
we could even sell the thing we invented, because it
yeah.
didn't exist before. So you had to go in and kind of talk to people about what you could do for them. What were the challenges when you first started for people in leadership and in organizations that you were solving?
Well, for one thing, I had been a leader. I owned the company and I was really dysfunctional. I made all the mistakes. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no model. If I'd had a book like yours, I'd probably never have gotten into this business. I would have led many companies forevermore. But I made all these mistakes. The company went bankrupt. And then I joined the company later where the leader was making similar mistakes. And I was going crazy trying to work with that. And so I left on my own and I began to go into companies. The problem with me going into a company, like you said, Texas Instruments, I ended up Texas Instruments, Intel, Honeywell, Motorola, was my resume was awful. I mean, when they said, "Okay, so tell us about you," I said, "Okay, let me see, alcoholism, bankruptcy, divorce." And they said, "Well, that's not optimal." Well, uh, then they would ask, "Can you help us?" And I'd say, "I don't know, but let's find out. Let's do a pilot. Let's put people in a room." What I would tell them is, put your decision makers in a room. Give me an hour. Give me 45 minutes. I will work with them, and then you decide after that if you want my work. And that was my system because I couldn't sell it. I was a
Mhm.
terrible salesperson. I didn't have a great, still don't have a great pleasing personality. I was kind of, haunted. I always matched up with when I watched these serial killer profiles of people that oh my gosh, I hope I don't do that someday. And but I would demonstrate. I would say, let me show you. And once I had one company, that's all I needed. Was once it really clicked with Motorola, I was able to say to people, let me show you what I did at Motorola. And they got the results. And they would be interested enough in what occurred at Motorola that they let my resume go.
Mhm.
Because they thought, well, if Motorola took him in and he's been there for 2 years, he can't be that bad. So from there, I just went from one company to another, and my resume became just my track record, the companies I'd been in, how long they kept me, and that's how it worked. And I took the things into the companies. I just taught the opposite of what I did when I ran a company into the ground.
And
And that,
what was that? What was the problem you solved, and what were you teaching people back then?
okay, back then I was teaching um, optimistic mindset versus pessimistic mindset. And I was using the work of Martin Seligman, who
Mm,
wrote Learned Optimism, because it had a lot of science behind it. It had proven studies that people who think with an optimistic system for thinking performed better, more productivity, less turnover, all kinds of good things. So I began with that. Then I created my own course called Owner Victim. And I said, you got people with a victim mindset or they have an ownership mindset, and they're not stuck in victim mindset when they see the advantage. And I can appeal to rational self-interest of your people that shifting the process by which you describe and think of things, which is easy to shift, it's just like learning a language. Your outcomes will be different, your internal feeling will be different. And so I took that and I called it the ownership spirit, and then I called it the owner victim choice. And that's the one that went to over 30 Fortune 500 companies. And they brought it in for morale, culture change. They had attitude problems. Motorola was the first company. They had sabotage on down in the manufacturing parts of the company. The employees hated the company so much that they were actually sabotaging the product as it went out. So they said, we got a really big problem here. And And I said, well, I have something that might help. So went into Motorola and it did help. And so that was the early teaching, changing the language with which you talk to yourself, the language with which you communicate with others. And I taught how to lead by agreement instead of leading by expectation. And that was another one that went through a lot of companies, and it still does. So
Which is funny.
that.
Every time you mention, the victim owner distinction, and then agreements versus expectations, every workshop I've ever been by any coach in the last 10 years has a piece of what you taught in their
Yeah,
workshop. And I have it in my book also. It's such a ground, like ground zero to all of our coaching.
yeah, yeah, it really caught on.
So what was the problem was morale in a lot
Yeah.
of those organizations?
Especially in Motorola. So I was with a corporate training company at the time, and we had been training in time management and goal achievement. And the leaders came into us and said, we have a morale problem here. Do you have a course for that? And I was sitting with the two owners of the company, and I'd become one of the lead trainers. And I said, yes. And they looked at me like, what? Because we didn't have anything. And they said, can we see it? And I said, sure, bring your people over. And the Motorola left, they were excited. And then the president and vice president said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, I've had an idea on a course like this. And they said, well, you can't blow our relationship with them with some idea you had. How do you know the course is any good? And I said, I think it will be. So they came in and I did the whole thing and they loved it. And so they brought me over, and that was history.
So what do you think is what? So now that you've been doing this for a few decades, and you've just helped so many coaches launch their practices, what has evolved? What you were addressing then? What are we addressing now? What do you see as the challenge today for leaders?
I think the challenge is ego today, collective ego and individual ego, where people are not partnering up, they're not collaborating. They feel like if I'm the leader, I should have the answers. And if I don't look like what my opinions are right, and I don't look like I have answers, then people won't think I'm a real leader. So what they do is shut them down from something that is really frightening for them to do, called asking for help. If they shut themselves off from that, they don't really plug into the power of what a group of people brainstorming a problem would give the company. Because they're afraid, well, if I have to tell the board of directors that somebody else came up with the idea, but that never turned out to be true. It was always the company's doing better and you're the leader, so we give you, we don't care where you got the idea.
Mhm.
And so I see the contracted clinging to identity, to ego. I'm not changeable. I'm not good at asking for help. And leaders who try to sell me on the permanence of who they are the ones who are most trapped and most miserable trying to lead a company.
So this is back to a lot of what you talked about early in your career too. Like it
Yeah.
really hasn't changed that much.
Well,
Why do you
that
think it's so hard for people to ask for help, admit when they're wrong, collaborate? Why do you think that's so hard?
it's primarily almost a spiritual issue where people grow up believing that they are separate entities, that who I am is this little homunculus trapped inside of a cranium, trying to manage things, and they don't experience the connected nature of the quantum field of energy and of all the people in their company who would collaborate with them to help them succeed if only they weren't so prideful and arrogant, or sometimes it's not arrogance, it's withdrawal. Like some leaders are inaccessible and isolated, and we never get time with him, and because they're afraid that their imposter syndrome
Mm.
will be revealed. And we see it in politicians now more than anybody. It's just like a seminar in how dysfunctional can you be if you're trapped in your own ego. You just watch people running for office, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I think the root cause is fear, right?
Yeah,
Root causes is fear in all of those areas that we're talking about.
yeah, it
So
is.
how do we help people climb out of that? How do we help people risk something different?
I think for in coaching, in the world of coaching, the way in is collaborating with a client to see if they are open to the possibility that there's another way to approach this, there's another worldview available to you. Are you open to the possibility? Not will you change 100%? Are you willing to be a different, better person? That's not what it is. You're a fine person, but your system of communication with others, and especially your system of communication with yourself, where you say, I got to do this. It's up to me. My job is on the line. I could lose everything. That system of self-communication just keeps contracting a person and solidifying the ego of this person. That has to expand. People have to open up and be open to the possibility there's a different way to do life, and there's a different way to lead your company.
And what do you think of the benefits of actually risking and trying all these new things? Because I talk to people about the same thing. It's like, let's just move the needle 10%. We don't
Yeah,
have to change completely. Let's just try 10% here. Let's delegate this one thing, see how it goes. Right.
yeah,
Let's speak up in the meeting about this one topic, see if you live. Right.
yeah.
That kind of thing. What's the benefit of putting yourself in that uncomfortable edge of growth?
Well, first of all, they have to see that being uncomfortable is okay. You don't want to have someone taking their emotional temperature all day long and finding out, do I feel good about this? Do I feel like doing this? Move above and beyond that, and operate out of your principles, operate out of your intention for what you want to get done, not operating out of your fear of maybe I'll be a little nervous, maybe I might look insecure. And you're absolutely right about incremental changes. All progress is made not on the polarities, but in the middle. So people say, I'm bad at this, I'm great at that, I'm bad at this, and they just lock themselves into self-judgment or pride. And where I like to take people is, okay, can we be a little better at that? Like you say, 10%. Let's just see if we can get a little movement along this line, because it is a underdeveloped line of development here. If you're having a hard time communicating with your people, that's just one skill you haven't developed. It's not about you. The fact that I can't play the cello, I don't walk around feeling guilty about that. I realize I haven't practiced playing the cello. So of course, if you hand me a cello, say play me something, I say sorry, I haven't put in the time. Well, leaders don't understand, most of them at the beginning. They say I'm not good at communicating with my people, being compassionate, listening to them deeply. Well, you've never done it.
Mhm.
And so it's not part of your identity at all. It is an underdeveloped line that if you would like to develop that, I will help you. And when they see it that way, they're open to the possibility, all right, let's experiment. And then once they experiment, you ask about the benefits. The benefits will be given to them by the universe itself. They don't have to believe in it ahead of time. They don't have to trust it. They just have to be willing to experiment.
Yeah, I love it because often it's like AA. People, the whole joke is you're in front of the judge, and the judge says it's 30 days in jail or 30 AA meetings, and and the guy in front of the judge says, "Can I think about it?" Right? Uh, uh, often with coaching, for me, I'm brought in when there's a problem.
Yeah, yeah,
This person's really talented and they're not leading their team right, or they're not getting along with the other team, or they're driving the CEO crazy. Like there's a reason to make them move. So
yeah,
that's the crowbar to get in, to make an incremental change and to show them that there's something new. Right.
yeah.
Very people, everything's firing on all cylinders. I think I'll go get help to get even better. Right. It's usually there's something wrong to
You're
move
right.
someone. Right.
Yeah.
Uh,
And that's the opportunity. And the fear with the person where something is going wrong is that it has something to do with their permanent identity.
mm,
And what they don't see is that they're simply using a system that doesn't work. And there are other systems they can experiment with, systems of communication. And so I had one leader who said, "Well, I'm not a very good listener. People come in, I tend to teach them and give them instructions." And I said, "Are you willing to experiment with having some no agenda meetings with some of your top people?" What? What? You have no agenda. You just want to hear how life is for them and what they would change. You're just going to listen to them for half an hour. Come on in. I'd like to hear how you see things.
mm,
Well, I can't do that. We'll fall behind. We need to move things forward. And I said, are you willing to experiment?
right.
And when they do that, and the system is you can ask a question, you can listen, but you're not going to teach them, order them, pontificate, show them how much you know. You can do that later. But for now, are you willing to experiment? So little systematic tricks like that allow people to get out of, is this really me? People want everything to be about their personal psychology
Mm.
instead of about a potential system that might work better.
The freedom that people don't know that exists when you let go of this little thing that you think you are, and then
Yeah,
you find out you have all these facets and all these things available to you. Again, it's hard to tell someone that exists until they experience it for themselves. I remember one client, when we had our chemistry meeting, he said to me, he goes, "Look, you're not going to change me. This is the way I am. I just need some tips and tricks to be more efficient and get more stuff done." I was like, cool. Years later, completely different life, completely
yeah,
different relationships and all that stuff. But you're not going to change me.
yeah,
And it's such an interesting thing. But it was like the breakdown from working so hard made him open to something different. You said something earlier though about the willingness to be uncomfortable, right?
yeah,
This being married to our feelings. I'm scared. I'm uncomfortable. I'm nervous. I've been speaking on stage now for, I don't know, a couple decades now. I'm still terrified before I walk out on stage. It
yeah,
just still has not gone away. And I've decided I'm okay being terrified.
yeah,
Everything I do is outside my comfort zone almost every single day. And I finally figured out how I feel is really none of my business.
yeah.
Right? How, like, that's a key that you just talked about, is how do you get that to not be personal so that you can go out in the world and experiment with things and not be afraid of those feelings that come up.
Yeah, well, it takes practice. And it also, after practice, it takes um, a different way of perceiving the energy that I label as fear and terror. It's just bodily sensations, and it is the nervous system on high alert. That doesn't have to be negative. The talks I give where I'm really feeling that, feeling anticipation, I'm feeling I might be a little short of breath, I'm feeling a lot of energy in the nervous system. I don't have to make that wrong. I don't have to try to push that away or wish it wasn't there. I can see it as I'm going to use this energy and it's going to get converted into connecting with people. And it does,
Mhm.
as you know, you can be terrified and 5 minutes into your talk, you're rocking and rolling, and that energy has been converted, still there, but now I've given it, wow, this is great. I'm flying high, I'm delivering, they're responding, and I'm going to give this energy a new label. I'm going to call it fired up or desire or something. But if we can drop the labels, these are just bodily sensations that come and go. I'm okay with that. I'm okay. What I used to label as I am uncomfortable. There is some discomfort in the system. That's okay. There's a little, we're going to play ball outside. There's some dark clouds. That's okay. It's not raining yet. Yeah, but wouldn't it be nice if the sun was shining? I like to play. Well, your preferences are not going to change the weather. My preferences for how I feel every moment, I want them to be irrelevant. And I want the job at hand, which is who I'm serving. I want that to be my focus, not me. I want to turn that telescope around because I'm looking out the wrong end of the telescope if I'm self-obsessed when I walk out on the stage or when I sit across the table from a client and I've got all spotlight pointing, how am I going to do? Am I going to impress them? The whole me. Once that gets released and the perception is how may I serve? How can I listen? I feel lighter. The conversation goes better and people are served. And with a little practice, it's self-rewarding. And pretty soon, I'm going to use that system all the time.
Our preferences are our jail. Those are
Yeah,
the things that weighing our down. We have no idea. One of the things that you said this on one of the audios that I listened to, I remember I was painting my office listening to this, and you said as a coach, if you're nervous coaching someone, your attention's in the wrong place.
yeah,
Right? That means your attention isn't over there in the person in front of you that you're coaching. Your attention's on you, right?
yeah,
And that goes with everything. If your attention is on you, again, if I'm walking out to speak to an audience, if I'm about to do a workshop, if I'm nervous, my attention is on me, how I'm going to perform, how I'm going to look. How do I change it? And Brian Johnson, who I opened the show talking about, and who was a client of yours, just saw a video of his earlier today where he's, and I don't remember the author he was quoting, but he says, don't listen to yourself, talk to yourself.
huh,
And I was like, that was new. Don't listen to yourself because you're just going to hear the same stupid shit all day long that you've always heard. Talk to yourself. Tell yourself how you're going to feel. Tell yourself how you're going to be in this moment. And I thought that was really profound. And I think
yeah.
that goes with what you're saying.
Yeah, and we don't know we can do that. That's the problem. People feel permanent and stuck, and they have that come brings all kinds of fear of what people think of me. And if I'm serving, I don't care about what people think of me. If I'm a paramedic, someone's lying on the floor with a heart attack, I don't think, oh my gosh, that's Bill Gates. He's a billionaire. What's he gonna, who am I compared to him? Meanwhile, he's there dying. And paramedics don't do that. They go right into action. They don't read their resume. They don't hand them a business card. They don't try to impress them with their personality. They just serve. And that's the thing. I went from one of the things I learned in Byron Katie that was so good. Um, I'm not seeking love and appreciation for what I do. That's not my objective because I'll be a nervous wreck no matter how much I get. But the next day when I wake up, it's not enough, it's gone.
Hmm.
It doesn't stay, and now I have to find it again. And you can never get enough of something you never needed to begin with. But if I look for who can I serve, how can I make a difference? Then I'm out of the little me trapped in worry, fear, and I'm connected to the universe. I'm interacting, and that's a beautiful feeling.
Yeah, what you're describing is a conscious choice. This doesn't, you're not automatically struck in service. You're not automatically struck not thinking of yourself. It's catching yourself, catching
Yeah,
myself, thinking about myself, catching myself trying to get love from a certain act,
yeah,
catching myself these things, and then making a choice to let go of that and say, you know what? I'm going to put my attention over there. And
yeah.
that practice gets easier and faster to where I remember it was interesting. I have severe ADD, and it's very hard for me to stay on track. But I noticed when I'm coaching, I'm laser focused. I don't have ADD. I remember everything. My clients can try and throw me off the track, and I'm laser focused. And then as soon as the Zoom call's done, I'm back to Ricochet Rabbit. But that was a clue to me. Oh, there's a time where the ADD doesn't even show up and it's not even a factor. That means I can take this into other places. I am capable of this.
Yes.
It's such an interesting thing. So what's next for you? What do you've written over 30 books. You've influenced every coach that's ever walked the earth. You've written beautiful, amazing songs. You've done comedy series on YouTube. What are you looking forward to next?
Um, I'm retiring this year from active coaching, and I'm going to do something I've always wanted to do, and that's full-time writing. So I won't be retired from writing. I'll be writing books, and I'm really looking forward to it. But I won't be coaching anymore, and that'll free up my writing time. So that's what's happening for me. I'm going to be turning 80 this year. And I realized being an 80-year-old motivator, not good branding. Uh, here we have a guy who's going to motivate all these Gen Z people. He's in a wheelchair. He's got an oxygen thing. We've had to mic him. You're not going to hear his whispery old voice, but he's going to motivate you today. No, I don't want to. I don't want to play that role. Um, I want to do the writing properly. I've never written a book where all I did was wake up and work on my book all day, day
Mm.
after day. So I'm interested to see what true full-time authorship might result in.
What do you have left to say? What hasn't been said
I have no
by
idea.
you?
I
I love
don't
that.
have, I don't have anything to say when you ask me right now. But once the blank page is there, it always comes through me anyway, which I always thought sounded like kind of fake humility. Um, but that's reality. When I edit myself and try to say something important and think I have something to say, it falls flat. When I
I,
open myself up to divine creativity, let it come through me, then I'm surprised by what lands on the page as much as anyone else. So I have no idea what's going to be written.
and I love that you trust that. For me, I think I did not write the Rising Leader Handbook. I didn't write only tens. Like it wanted to be written, and it threw me on the ground and made me write it.
Yeah,
Because like that's just like taking a guy with this kind of ADD and sitting him down at a keyboard was not a thing. But trusting that energy And you wrote about that, I think, in Creator,
Yeah.
one of your books. Uh, I'm telling you, by the way, if you're listening, like you can go through every single book. You can leave the book in the bathroom. The way Steve writes a book is they're little chapters, they're little vignettes, and you can read one little vignette. You can just open the book and read a vignette and have a life-changing conversation with Steve Chandler. And Stephen King and Stephen Chandler are the people I read the most books from.
Oh,
So I got my horror and I got my self-help in direction. It's very cool.
well, I'm flattered by that.
Yeah, again, I don't, as I started this podcast, I don't know what my life would have been had I not come across your books. And I am greatly appreciated you and Brian Johnson and Rich Litvin and Steve Hardison, all at a time when it didn't look like there was anything left for me to do in life. And look what happened, from your ripple effect, from a word you wrote on a page to another human being, and hopefully for me to pass that on. So I appreciate you, Steve.
Oh, you're welcome.
If people want to get in touch with you or find out more about you, is there a place they can do that?
Stevechandler.com.
Great. Are those audios, like the victim owner distinction, and are those all on your website, or because I keep seeing you giving them out for free here and there?
Yeah, I give them out. Anybody who wants one of those, they can email me or they can go to the website and ask for it. I give them out for free, but they're also for sale
Good.
on the web.
I'm gonna put all that in the show notes. Some of these audios, they're about 30 minutes long, and if you share them with your teams, again, agreements versus expectations. If you just share that audio of Steve Chandler with your team, you've just created a culture that's changed, just by all of you listening to the same audio and having a discussion. So I really recommend it. Steve, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mark.
I appreciate you. To everybody else, I really appreciate your time and attention. I appreciate the fact that you get up every day, suit up, show up, and do your best. I love you a ton. Have a great rest of the day.